Flash was a significantly worse problem than Oracle or consultation is. Mm-hmm. We can conduct that conversation in another talk, but
hello everyone, welcome to Lab Maniacs. As always, I'm Cameron, and today we have Cobble with us today. How you doing today, Cobblepott?
Doing good. It's good to see you, Cam.
Yeah, it is. The pandemic has kept us all apart for so long. I can't wait to get started again. Yep. But in the meantime, we had something really big that just happened. We had an update from the Rules Committee. Do you want to read through that for us?
Sure. The thing that most of the people, I think, are going to be interested in is the fact that Hullbreacher as a card has been banned. So they had a 2-paragraph explanation, and it goes as, Hullbreacher has been a problem card since its release. Its ostensible defensive use against extra card draw has been dwarfed by offensively combining it with mass draw effects to easily strip players' hands while accelerating the controller. That play pattern isn't something we want prevalent in casual play, see the Lee of Old ban. And we have seen a lot of evidence that it is too tempting even there as it combines with wheels and other popular casual staples. The case against the card was overwhelming. There remain a few similar cards that are still permitted, notably Notion Thief and Narset Parter of Veils. The additional hoops required, an additional color pip for Notion Thief and sorcery speed for Narset, appear to be keeping them to the appropriate level of play, though we'll continue to keep an eye on them. I think that is accurate.
Mm-hmm. I definitely do agree there. When Hullbreacher enters play, like, the game starts revolving around it and around who can break parity with the person who controls a Hullbreacher. Or everybody wants to control a Hullbreacher, so nobody gets anything, right?
Right. It becomes the Gilded Drake pass around.
Very much. Or the Phantasmal Image copy farm.
Right.
Did you play when Prophet of Krufix or Primeval Titan were still legal in Commander?
I did not play when Primeval Titan was legal. I don't know if Primeval Titan ever was legal, but I didn't play with that. But I definitely played when Prophet was legal. That was awesome in Derevi. But
yeah,
I remember that being very similar to what we're seeing here, a very different maybe experience that's being espoused by the community, the competitive end of the community versus the casual end of the community.
Oh, yes. So yeah, Primeval Titan was legal for a few years. And similar to Prophet of Krufix, as soon as it hit play, everybody just tried to abuse Primeval Titan as much as possible. And what ended up happening is usually it wasn't the deck that actually played the Primeval Titan. It was another deck that could clone it or kill it and reanimate it multiple times and just get a massive advantage. And very similar to both Krufix and Primeval Titan, Hullbreacher does this, but it doesn't give the person who controls it like a meaningful long-term resource to actually win the game. It just makes the games drag on. Is that what you found as well?
Well, so it plays out very differently in competitive versus casual.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
I see Hullbreacher being very similar to Paradox Engine. Where,
yes.
At a competitive table, someone plays a Paradox Engine, and then they're in the place to be able to win the game immediately. That's what their decks are built around. That's what they're postured towards. So, all right, they've got their Paradox Engine. Now they go off, and everyone says okay, and then they go to the next game. Same thing goes with Hullbreacher, where you wheel, and now you've got enough treasures to be able to put together whatever you need for your combo to end the game. And even if you don't do it that turn, within a cycle, you're off to the races. At casual tables, both of those cards play out very differently because the bent of most people's deck design is not around winning as consistently and fast as possible. So what happens is, someone gets a Paradox engine down and they take a really long turn and not much happens. And what winds up happening is everybody else winds up spending a lot of time just kind of looking at one person playing while they're waiting for a chance to play. Same goes for Hullbreacher. So somebody in the case that they're describing here, where someone weaponizes a wheel and strips everybody's hands, that person who stripped everybody else's hands is very likely not going to have what they need to win the game. So the other three players are just going to kind of sit there with no cards in hand, top decking. Oh, I got a land. All right. And basically not doing anything while they're waiting for the other player to win who isn't ready to win. And that's just, there's no feel goods taking place in that circumstance.
Yeah. And one thing that you note about Hullbreacher is it has flash. It makes it so that you get those gotcha moments, but it makes it way too easy to end of turn Hullbreacher into a wheel right away. And you get really fast offensive play there. But what's kind of interesting is that at the same time that they were designing this, they also did Ashiok Dream Render, where it is an entirely defensive ability. And if you cause them to do stuff, it doesn't do it. So they made it so Field of Ruin wouldn't strip mine people in standard. So because you control that ability, if you Field of Ruin while you had Ashiok, they could still search. If Hullbreacher had been listed, or it had said, if an ability an opponent controls would cause them to draw a card, that's not their first card they draw this turn, we probably would be in a different place, right?
Most certainly. And a number of people have brought up that that concept that if had the templating not been so greedy, the card would play very, very much differently, because it would still be a good card, because basically it would be like a Smothering Tithe on a creature, in that circumstance. So that's still pretty good, and on the competitive end, it still wouldn't really be that much of a problem. And on the casual end, you wouldn't have these circumstances where people unintentionally or accidentally get themselves into a situation where they're playing a boring game because that's mechanically not what would take place.
Yeah. I mean, I had this happen back when Narset first came out, but it was a Locust God deck. And the whole point was they wheeled, nobody else drew cards, but then they just got a million insects and killed everybody. So it didn't matter. We weren't sitting around for an hour waiting for them to finish out the game. But here, Hullbreacher just doesn't do that on the casual end of things. What are your thoughts on why they banned Hullbreacher instead of the wheel effects?
I don't necessarily have a lot of insight into the why of that particular decision, but I mean, for me, if it was me making that choice, I too would hang on to the wheels and get rid of the payoffs. The wheels, first of all, I mean, Commander's the last place that anyone is gonna have a chance to play those cards most of the time, because a lot of people vintage is out of reach for them to be able to play. So if you want to play your Time Twister or your Wheel of Fortune, then it's kind of Commander or Cube, and that. So like there's that aspect of it right away. The other aspect of it is that if you're looking at effects that are splashy and fun in multiplayer, where, hey, guess what? We're in the midst of a game that's progressing for a long time. Here, I'm going to give everybody 7 cards. In a casual context, that's a fun thing that happened. Everybody got a whole bunch of cards. Maybe people are reanimator people and they've got some creatures in their graveyard now because they discarded. That's kind of a positive thing. Hullbreacher or Notion Thief or Narset, those are more punitive, kind of proactive sorts of cards that they have their purpose and they're great and competitive, but for the casual scene, I don't know if they have quite the same level of fun attached to it that you would have something like a Time Twister, for instance. So I think that it's the right choice to go the way that they did.
I definitely agree there. I do have the Wheel of Fortune and the Time Twister, and I like playing with them. They're just fun to play. Before I played competitive, I just had them in a casual deck to play with them so that I could.
Right.
And it is kind of the last place, and it would feel definitely kind of a letdown to pull Wheels out of Commander, especially because they've been there since the start of Magic.
Yeah.
And now we have these cards that have come in the last 7 years. I mean, Notion Thief was 2013, but Narset and Hullbreacher were 2019, 2020. So they're really new, and having them push out some of the old history for Magic would be a really big letdown for me as well.
I would agree.
So I'm happy that they pulled Hullbreacher here. Now, with this, there's like a really big divide between people on the competitive side of things and on the casual side of things. And for me, you have to think about how this feels for normal players when they're just sitting down to have fun, because that's what EDH is like. Really, the original goal of EDH was to sit down and have fun after judging a long tournament, right?
Right.
And so if you're sitting down and somebody plays a card and now the entire game revolves around that card, or that one person takes a turn on every other player's turn, it takes a bit of that fun out of it for everybody else. How do you feel the announcement has been met by the competitive community compared to the general EDH community from what you've seen?
I think that, judging from the circles that I run in on Twitter and on Discord and on Reddit, the majority of the response has been positive. On Facebook, it's been less so, but there is a group of voices that are decrying this as a bad decision to make. But that's the minority of what I'm hearing in the competitive scene, and something that I think that is important for everybody who plays EDH, whether it's EDH or cEDH, is to maybe push back on the impetus to feel like the experience that you have is what is normal. I think people say, this is my play group and this is the thing that everybody else does because this is my experience. I've never seen that happen, so it's not a problem. That's easy to fall into, and that's very problematic because EDH is really, really big, and it's many, many different things to many, many different people. And people need to understand that if there's a decision that's being made that doesn't feel like the right decision for them and their circumstances, that doesn't mean that it's a wrong decision. It just means that it's probably a right decision for other people and their circumstances. And, we kind of have to trust the RC to make, to do their diligence and make those calls based on the information that they have available. And that's hard. It's hard to know what all of EDH wants, and you're never going to make everybody happy with a decision. So you have to use the data that you've got to make the best decision, for the format.
Yeah, definitely. I know that they reached out. I mean, they created the Commander Advisory Group, and each of them, everybody on those groups reach out to their communities. Right. So it gets a very diverse polling of information that's then filtered up to the advisory group and then filtered up to the RC to make that decision.
Right.
And it definitely does help as far as trying to get the whole picture. Because, I mean, everybody on the advisory group, I don't even watch or consume a quarter of the content that those folks create. I mean, I don't know about you. Do you even? I think I maybe follow 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, I think I'm about regularly. The same. Maybe 3 or 4 for me. But I think that's the idea, that you don't have people consuming all of their content, because then that would mean that there's a homogenization of those audiences. So the idea is that you want to have disparate audiences. Each of those people has a following of people that are not necessarily going to be the same as the others. That way you're getting the wider spread, or the wider net of people that have their ear to be able to give them feedback. So when all of the people on the CAG say, let me know the thing that is, hurting you in your local scene, you're drawing from as many different people as possible to be able to get that information.
And I really do appreciate that they have a very diverse group that's there, because it makes it so that we do get a larger picture of what EDH is as a whole. One other thing that I saw, a few people on Reddit, a few people on Facebook were talking about how Hullbreacher makes no sense as a ban. Why are we still playing with Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation? And Hullbreacher isn't even a win condition for most decks. The last ban that we had was Flash, and that took quite a bit to happen. And it was their first real ban from a competitive EDH side of things. And this kind of the thing to note here is that the Flash ban made it so that competitive EDH was kind of stable and fun and interacting again. And Hullbreacher banning is much more for the casual side of things. They're not going to be looking at Thassa's Oracle, because when Thassa's Oracle hits play, the game's over. It's not a really long, drawn-out, boring time for 3 other people. It's just, let's move on to the next game and let's keep playing. You get to keep playing when a Thassa's Oracle hits play, because you just start another game.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, again, when you're trying to assess the totality of the EDH community, you've got the battle cruiser, or the core demographic, or what you want to call the main group of people. And the cEDH community is an order of magnitude smaller than that. That group of the community. So generally, you're going to lean more towards making sure that you're satisfying the needs of the many before you're looking at the needs of the few. So in the case of things like Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pact, there's a lot of people who are in the competitive segment that are complaining about the impact that's having on their games. This is a different topic, but I would say that Flash was a significantly worse problem than Oracle or Consultation is. We can conduct that conversation in another talk. But in this particular case, it's a problem for competitive people, but there's almost no problem in the wider community with people exploiting Thassa's Oracle. So, that, again, it comes down to, just because let's say you being the competitive player are experiencing something, that doesn't mean that that's the same experience that everybody else is having. And just because your life is being made miserable by a card doesn't mean that everybody else is. And in this case,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to ban Thassa's Oracle because it's not creating that level of misery across the community. Hullbreacher, on the other hand, was absolutely creating misery across the community because not only was it seeing play in a lot of places, but when it's played, I don't want to say poorly, but when it's played and then not followed up with a win, it leads to games that don't feel fun. And very, very quickly that becomes a problem. If people in the casual community played Thassa's Oracle and then won right away, I mean, people probably wouldn't get too worked up about that because that's not creating a situation where they have to sit around twiddling their thumbs for a while waiting for somebody to do something before they can play the game again. So
yeah,
it's
kind of like Hullbreacher, if it's played without a win directly after, is very close to like mass land destruction.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, the game just drags on and nobody's actually playing. They're just sitting around.
Right.
And so I definitely agree with your take on it and how this has gone on. From the competitive EDH perspective, do you have any thoughts on how Hullbreacher leaving might affect things?
So there's a lot of impact on, I would say, the big three partners. So Thrasios, Tymna, and Kraum. All three of them have the word draw in their rules text. And they all were, sources of incremental draw that people could accumulate in various ways, that as soon as a Hullbreacher comes down, all of them are immediately mitigated. And not only is your ability to draw cards to be on your game plan is mitigated, but your ability to draw cards to find removal to get yourself out of the situation is also being mitigated. So it's doubly impactful in that way. The removal of Hullbreacher will... I won't say that any of those cards were poorly positioned, but all of their positions is improved now that Hullbreacher is not going to be on the table. Hullbreacher doesn't impact Necropotence or Ad Nauseam in any way. So Turbo Naus is still going to be as good as ever because it doesn't care about any of those types of effects.
Yeah.
I think that, you look at Opus Thief. Opus Thief existed well before Hullbreacher was a thing. And it was a good deck before Opus Thief, or before Hullbreacher was a thing. When Hullbreacher came out, it became very good.
Yes.
But I don't think that the loss of Hullbreacher will knock Opus Thief completely out of contention. I think it still has a critical mass of the types of effects that it wants to be able to take advantage of what it wants to do. And it's a sore loss to not have Hullbreacher, but I think that there's still enough value there for that deck to still have legs.
I do agree on that. I think there were, classes of decks like the evolution decks where they were really just trying to jam out a wheel payoff and a wheel as fast as possible and then snowball that into a win.
Right.
That they're going to be knocked down several pegs.
Sure.
Because they're losing. I mean, they usually just try to either jam a Smothering Tithe or a Hullbreacher as fast as possible, or a Notion Thief, and then wheel and go from there. And they've lost one of their key components that was arguably the easiest for them to cast. And so that is going to be... I'm guessing most of those decks are going to be kind of shifted out of the meta for a little while. They may come back. I mean, they're strong decks, but...
You can do evolution style decks in a couple of different ways. In one way, you can rely on wheels and a wheel payoff to generate a ton of treasures, and then pump all of those treasures into Thrasios to draw yourself into, a loop to be able to kind of keep on going, or you play the kind of the slower, grindier, reduction-oriented game where you're, running, Zerda and, the other things that reduce the activation costs of things such that, and Seedborn Muse, so that you're just kind of doing the loop around the table, activating and drawing cards that way. So I think what you'll see is the more explosive, wheel-oriented versions of those decks is going to kind of come to the wayside, while the original more grindy versions of those decks is what you're going to see take over for those.
The mid-range grind fests.
Yes. I like that.
It's a fun interactive game. Everybody gets to do what their deck's trying to do, and then they get to interact. It's kind of what you're really aiming for in a good game of Commander. So, yeah. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts regarding Hullbreacher getting banned?
I think it's a good call. I like Hullbreacher as a card, and if it was still around, I wouldn't think twice about it. But I am understanding the rationale of why it's gone, and we are EDH players before we're cEDH players, and if that's the right thing for the larger community, then I'm on board with it.
I definitely agree with that. What's kind of funny is when Commander Legends was spoiled, we had Opposition Thief and we had Hullbreacher. And everybody thought Opposition Thief was going to be the end-all, be-all, the best card out of the entire set. And it usually ends up being like a 1 or 2 times gotcha. It is very rarely ever something that doesn't only get more than 1 card. And now Hullbreacher is getting banned. I just find that incredibly mind-boggling how much the community reacted towards both of them initially and where we're at right now.
I would say that a resolved opposition agent is definitely really, really difficult to deal with at a competitive table because of the saturation of tutors.
Yeah.
The thing that made Hullbreacher so much more was the way that it can be exploited at casual tables. Whereas opposition agent, if you're playing against a field of opponents that aren't tutoring for the most part, then it doesn't really do anything. No matter what type of game you're playing, people are going to be drawing cards. So Hullbreacher is always going to be generating value for you, whereas opposition agent is going to be more narrow in the place where it's going to pay dividends.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time I've seen opposition agent resolve, it steals a land. And very rarely do I see an opposition agent steal a non-land card. When it does, it's really great. But.
Right. The power of it is, certainly the ability to steal stuff is very powerful. But I think just the fact that it keeps everybody off of being able to look up responses to get themselves out of the mess is really what makes it as good as it is. But then, Aven Mind Sensor does the same thing. So
yeah, just not quite as good, but still does. Yeah,
some people in their top 4 get real lucky. So.
They do, and sometimes they don't. I'm in the latter half usually.
That's right.
But well, I think that about wraps us up. Thank you for joining me, sitting down and talking about this.
Absolutely.
I'm still needing to go through and prune through all my decks and find any lone Hullbreachers that are out there. I don't know if you've already done that or not.
Not yet. I've got at least 2 of them to tear out of somewhere.
But, oh well. I don't think. I've seen people started to burn theirs, but
I've seen people tear them up and take pictures of the torn up Hullbreachers.
I don't think you need to do that yet. You probably could still sell them for people playing Legacy.
They're still worth $6.
Yeah, they're still worth. I mean, they got down to a third of what they were worth, but they're still definitely worth some money.
Right.
Anyways, until next time, I'm Cameron. This is Cobblepott. Have a great day.
Have a good one.